Hello and welcome back to Complex Conversations. This is episode 5. I've coding the Mandelbrot sets. As you can see, we're joined by a special guest today who's dressed up. Thank you, Jason. And also Luke Evans, he's here as well. I'm your host, Isaac Bates, and let's get started. So, you have to code the Mandelbrot set, right?
Mhm.
How? What language? What library?
So
How?
so we implemented the Mandelbrot set in Python just because it's a functional language that is able to do everything we needed, and it's something that we're both proficient in. And as far as libraries, a library is just a pre-existing like amount of code that you can use in your projects that people have already made and optimized. So we use libraries called matplotlib, which basically allows you to take a bunch of data from Python and plot it on a graph, that graph being an Argand diagram for the Mandelbrot set. But yeah, so we programmed it in Python using a couple of subroutines. And
Okay. I feel like I asked the question I was going to go to. What's a subroutine?
Well, it's basically like you've got a certain like module of code that you can like call from other parts of the program, and it's self-contained to the actual program. It has its own variables that can only be accessed in that program.
Alright, so how does the whole thing work? Like, what makes it. What do. Nah, you just answer.
so basically, what it does is there's a function that takes in an input for a specified range of complex arguments. So you can choose how like precise and fine you want the output to be. But what it does is it takes all the complex inputs, runs the calculation on them a couple of times. You can choose. We set I think 50 as a baseline, so it didn't have too much runtime. And then basically, if it stays contained within the if it spirals off to infinity, then it gets marked by a different color than to whether it kind of stays in the area. And it does that 50 times to get a good sense of whether it diverges or converges. And you end up with a nice color map of all the different points.
Alright. So, is there any way of improving this? Like, making it more precise? Because you find the Mandelbrot set, there's plenty of spaces that do diverge after like 1,000 terms.
True. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main things is computational power, especially when programming like the WhatsApp, because there's so many like you have to run so many calculations, and also another way of improving it is the resolution of like how many values of C you're checking, like what's the difference between them. It's like, oh, if you have 1,000 values of C between 0 and 1, that's going to be a lot less precise than if you have 100,000 values of C. Um, so it's basically you have like a number line, you can like increase the amount of values in between that. But that requires so much more computational power that we weren't able to do on our home computers.
The straightforward answer to deal with what you said about things that don't converge for 1,000 terms is the algorithm uses recursion with a depth of 50, which is what I'm saying, which is basically calls itself 50 times until it gets a final value. So the straightforward way to just increase the results would just be to increase the depth, but that's proportional to computational power, as Luke was saying. So that's the easiest thing to
Okay,
improve.
so it says here we're to ask about parameters, but I have a question before that. What are parameters?
So a parameter is just the inputs of the function that we program with. So, for example, the parameter would be what the function is like taking in and doing calculations with and outputting. In this case, it uses recursion, so it kind of uses its output as an input multiple times until it reaches the depth. So the input will be a complex number, and then the output will be whatever the chosen calculation is on it.
And what are they in this case?
In this specific case, you just have the function which iterates through the sequence that is the Mandelbrot set. So basically, the input is just Zn as a complex number,
So-
and the output is Zn plus 1.
Got it. I think that's everything. Thank you, Jason, for joining us this episode.
No problem.
We'll see you in episode 6, which will be the history of the Mandelbrot sets. Bye.